FC24 came out 10 months ago, so being a manager might be getting a little bit boring. Luckily, with a few changes, we can actually make career mode feel totally different, and today we'll look at how to play career mode as things like a director of football, a head coach, a player manager, and a couple of other ideas. So let's start with probably the most fun, which in my opinion is the player manager. You get the fun of playing games and also the fun of managing all in one package, and it's also super easy to do. Open manager mode like normal, pick a club that has an old player, create your manager to look like them and have the same name, and then just lock controls to that one player every time you play a match. You might think that this is an unrealistic way to play football because there's no real teams out there that do this at the moment, but player managers have actually had success at basically every level. Kenny Dalglish won 3 Premier League titles at Liverpool as a player manager. Ruud Gullit, Brian Robson, Stuart Pearce and Nigel Clough have all tried it too, but a little bit less successfully. I'm sure you have some good ideas for good candidates to be player managers, but I'd be interested in seeing how Tommy Muller would manage at Bayern, or how Jesus Navas taking over at Seville would end up. Some of the other types of manager we're about to talk about might be a little bit more radical, but for such a small change, this kind of save could give you a new experience, one where you have to sign players to make sure that your player manager still performs on the pitch, rather than just replacing them because they're one of your older players. Believe it or not, you can actually simulate basically every part about being a director of football on FC24. Rather than managing the games yourself, you can just focus on buying the players, developing an academy and managing the club's finances, while leaving tactics and gameplay to somebody else. It's actually a really good way to see how good you are actually signing players, and how much of your success in the past has come from you just being better than the AI at playing the game. One of the best bugs in FC24 career mode is actually the one that lets you watch AI versus AI, just like you can on something like Football Manager. The original tutorial was posted on FIFA 23, but it still fully works for this year's game too. All you have to do is lock your cursor to a player in the menu before going to a game, and as long as this player isn't on the pitch, the game will just play by itself. You can either do this by substituting a player off as soon as you load in the game, or by selecting a team sheet before kickoff that doesn't have the locked in player. As soon as the game starts, you'll be given the option to watch the rest of the match, and I think this is so much better than just using tactical view. If you don't want to abuse this bug, or if it ever gets patched, then of course tactical view still does work, and maybe on FC25 we'll have a straight up CPU versus CPU career mode built into the game. Anyway, as director of football, you can fully focus on setting up the team and see how your tactics get on in the game. It's a good way to learn how tactics work if you're not too sure, and it's also a good way to find out how good you are at really signing players. One of the biggest tasks you'll have is to pick a manager, so this is something else you can also kind of simulate on FIFA. If you're on PC, you can change your manager's face and name with Cheat Engine, but if you're not feeling that, you can still get accurate tactics from real life managers just by cloning team sheets. If you want to pretend that your team's just hired Jurgen Klopp, just copy the Liverpool team sheet and you'll get how he liked to play. If you preferred Ancelotti, copy Madrid. If you want Sean Dyche's long ball, copy Everton. And you can do this with loads of managers, especially managers you can't actually play as in-game, people like Mourinho, just by copying their team sheets. It's a totally different way of playing the game, but it's one that I really enjoy doing and one I've made a couple of series on this channel already about. While the director of football is a big change that makes you think about the game a bit differently, becoming an assistant manager is a much more chilled way to play the game. It's really easy to do, we don't have to exploit any bugs this time, just play the games and do the training sessions. Use AI to give you signing requirements so you know what players can come into the club, let them suggest formations and player instructions, and all you have to do is use their tactics, use their signings, and try and win as many games as you can. You're solely in charge of basically developing players that are given to you from above, and I've done this kind of save a bunch in the past on Football Manager, and I'm sure it's just as fun to do inside FC24. The assistant manager save is kind of similar to the head coach save, and I totally get it if you prefer to play as your team rather than just watching them as a director of football. If you feel transfers are either boring or unrealistic, then being a head coach is slightly better for you. It's a small change compared to assistant manager, also it's a small change compared to just being a regular manager, but you're going to be focused on just improving players on the pitch rather than negotiating and doing any kind of transfer stuff like that. The whole negotiation system is actually pretty good on FC24, and it is quite challenging to get a player significantly under their value, but it is also quite rare in real life for a manager to go and negotiate a deal all by themselves. Instead, for the majority of transfers, I think it makes more sense just to delegate to the director of football. If you want to keep your transfers even more realistic, I'd suggest you probably only sign players that you can find on your scouting list. You can pick the nations to send them to, but I'd avoid using Transfer Hub to search out players that you've seen on Geografifa or you've signed in other career modes in the past. Going back to delegating the signings, this is actually really easy to do. Instead of pressing negotiate, just simply press delegate. You can still give the values you think the player will cost, but delegating helps with realism in a couple of different ways. The first is the amount of time that it takes to actually get the player to join the club. With a normal transfer, you can sign a player on the day of a match, and if you finish agreeing their wage, they'll be in your squad instantly with some match fitness and no need to learn the tactics. Delegate works a little bit differently. Instead, your pretend director of football will take a few days to get back to you, and if there's any problem with transfer fee or wage, then this can take up to 2 weeks to actually sign a player. I think that this is way better, and there is actually a real chance that transfer talks will break down. It means you might have to move on to your second or third choice player in that position, and that's what I think makes the head coach kind of role in career mode so much more hardcore than just being a manager. If none of these other ideas work for you, then why not give the out of control caretaker a go? Caretaker managers are usually appointed when teams can't find a manager that actually wants to manage their club, so the trust between manager and board isn't quite there. This means we can put some big restrictions on how we play, and to make it even harder, you can never offer new contracts. Instead, all you have to do is wait for your players to expire. The board will try and keep a few of them, but if they can't agree terms, they will actually just bring in new players of a similar rating, and this is the only way that anyone new will join your club at any point of your career mode. You can also limit yourself to no academy, making no signings, and even delegating your tactics and formation to something like ChatGPT, and I think you'll have one of the hardest and definitely one of the most out of control save possible. All you'll have to do is play the games on the pitch. You don't have to worry about transfers, scouting, academy, any kind of morale stuff. All you have to do is try and win as many games as you can so that you can get offered one of the other roles. Maybe if you do well enough, you can actually move on to be one of the other types of saves we talked about today. It has happened in real life a lot of times. Roberto Di Matteo won the Champions League with Chelsea as a caretaker manager, and he was rewarded by being appointed full-time manager back about a decade ago. Of course, you can just play manager mode how it was intended with the rules that EA gives us just by being a manager, but if you ever get bored of that, come back to this video and give one of these ideas a go. They can really make your career mode a lot more fun, and I recommend every single one of them if you are getting a bit bored of career mode. Anyway, thank you for watching. Why don't you check out the video in the playlist on screen right now if you want to see me being a director of football, or you want to learn a little bit more about how that one works. But thank you to everyone who's a channel member, anyone who's liked this video or subscribed. I've got some big videos coming up over the next month, so make sure you join the channel if you can. And thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Cheers and goodbye.